Mr. Murphy?
Present. Thank you. And now we have communications, announcements, and schedules with the inimitable Dr. Londine Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. On January 20th, we will have report card distribution. And I'm happy about the fact that parents actually know what the grades are prior to that because they can monitor on PowerSchool. But we do give them a printout copy. It's no longer the old report card, but it is a printout of the grades. It's spelling bee time. It's spelling bee time. February 2nd, we will have our spelling bee downstairs in the PAC. I will talk about that a little later, but it is on the schedule. And then the mid-quarter progress reports will be distributed on February 13th. We're closed, no school for President's Day. We meet again on the 21st for our regular scheduled meeting. Southland will have their Black History program on February 23rd. But then we're back to doing something that we have done in the past, and we're happy about that. And that is the joint program with Rich 227. But I think that you're aware that not only will Southland be there, but the elementary districts will also perform. Mr. President, representing District 162, Dr. Mays simply can't wait. And so therefore, she will be our elementary school representing, and then we will wait and see with 159 and 163. But the family will be together, and our date is February 27th. And then I will talk to a great extent, because I need some help, about a joint event that we're doing on March 1st. You may or may not know, but there's an organization called the Commission, and it started out to be all of the African-American superintendents in the state of Illinois. And some of you have been to the scholarship program and distribution that we have had for the past 15 years. It's expanded. Now there's 37 of us. And in my other life, I was the chairperson of the United Negro College Fund scholarship program in Chicago. They've had some problems during COVID, and so they came to see me and asked would we chair a program in the South suburban area. I told them that the commission would, and we're not all in this area. For example, we're in Kankakee, we're in Great Lakes, we're all over the place, but that we would be happy to do that. And the reason that we're happy to, I shouldn't talk about it now, but the reason we're happy to do it is that we do have a scholarship program, but the most that we have been able to raise is $37,000. We intend to raise a minimum of $100,000. But from what I am hearing today from those who are working with me, perhaps we can even make more than that. And so we will be giving scholarship money to those that are attending the HBCUs. However, our own scholarship program that the commission has had for the past 15 years will benefit from this program, but I will discuss it later on. But that concludes the communications to date. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. At this time, we will have the audience to visitors pertaining to agenda items only, which means essentially if there is anything on the agenda and there is someone who is present today who wishes to ask a question or perhaps give comment on that particular item, that the board will give audience to their question or comment. Is there one? There being none, we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Vice President.
move to approve the consent agenda dated January 17, 2023, and every item contained therein.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, Dr. Davis?
No, Mr. President.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Murphy?
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson? Aye. Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood?
Aye.
Mrs. McCray?
Aye.
Mr. Bean?
Aye.
And at this time, we will have the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last night, we had an issue, and we're fortunate that the issue was not what we had some time ago. And that is someone decided to throw a brick through a window at the Illinois. What I thought at first when I heard this is that we were going to have a repetition of what we had some 8 to 10 years ago, but that was not it. Just to remind everyone, 8 to 10 years ago, we had 3 break-ins at the Illinois and at the Indiana. We purchased all new computers for the Indiana. We weren't thinking, we were thinking innocently. Our janitors threw out the boxes. That night, someone broke into the school, took all of the computers. We replaced the computers, and we took the advice of the Park Forest Police and put some precautions in place. And that was what we thought was an unbreakable glass. There was a second break-in. We experienced the same kind of a thing, and then this spread to the Illinois. This was in Park Forest. Last night, when I heard that a brick was thrown through the window, I thought about this, and I thought, would our security hold? And it did. And so we have motion sensors. Had they stepped foot inside of the building, instantly the police would have been there, because Mr. Wozak hardly gets a good night's sleep from, remember, we have 8 buildings. So if a motion sensor goes off, it triggers the alarm company comes, the police come, and so that held. Mr. Wozak and his team also put what truly is, we think, an unbreakable glass, because we saw previously that someone hit the glass with a hammer, and with it, whatever else they hit, that glass held. So last night we did experience a brick inside the building. We did not experience a loss. The system worked. And I do want to compliment the Park Forest Police. They're always watching, always looking. And I'm very happy to say that everything that they recommended that we put in place, and we don't always talk publicly about what we have in place because I think we don't know who's listening, but we do have preventative measures in all of our schools that will prevent those who do not mean us well, if we understand that, from coming inside of the building. So that's all I'll say about that. But we do have to replace the window. We do not have to replace anything else because the measures that we had in place held. But moving on, a week ago, we had a family that was burned out. They lost everything. The children were out with no shoes, no clothes, nothing. And Dr. Thomas and I, who is the superintendent of 227, decided to partner. 6 of those children are in 162. We have 5 at the Arcadia and 1 at the Indiana. The older children went through 227, but the mother is employed in the lunchroom at 227. And so we partnered together. And so the results of this partnering, we're now at $8,300. You know that we did a GoFundMe. But in addition to that, the Illinois, and Dr. Mays has her own way of looking at things. We have in our safe here in the building $1,050 in cash, separate and apart from in addition to the GoFundMe from the Illinois. And thank you, all the teachers, all the parents, everyone. From the Indiana, $285, from the Hoover, $380, the Arcadia, Mrs. Ransford, and Mrs. Dr. Healy are giving daily packets of food, care packages, collecting clothes, etc. And the Richardson Square is doing backpacks with personal hygiene, et cetera. But what we've also seen is that our Greek organizations have joined with us. They are prepared as soon as we are able to get an apartment for the family to bring in furniture and carpeting and so forth. So our thanks to the Kappas, our thanks to the AKAs, the Deltas. They've just done a wonderful job. And so we've surrounded them. But Dr. Thomas and I are going to be meeting with her, and we certainly want her to know that the family came together, and it truly did. We have contributions from churches here in this building, as you know, because it is a school. We had clothing for all the children. And I also want to thank Mrs. Dixon. Where are you, Mrs. Dixon? She's just a wonderful person when you're in need. And so the mother came here first, Mrs. Dixon met with her. And so we're over $10,000. And that does not that does not include what the various organizations are doing. So we're grateful for that. And I think it's going to work out for her. MTSS, PBIS, Mrs. Dusky, what are we doing, please?
Good evening, board. Good
Good
evening,
evening.
Dr.
Good evening.
Davis. Good evening, audience. Well, we're always doing something with MTSS and PBIS. And this week and next week, we're doing our mid-year walkthroughs just to do check-ins at each of the school buildings to see how they're progressing toward their goals. At the beginning of the year, everybody established a beginning of the year goal, and they took some surveys that they shared with students, and even a few parents took the surveys to see what the needs were in the building. So we're just looking to see what the data is supporting academically and behaviorally. And we're doing those walkthroughs this week and next week throughout the building with the team leads, the principals, assistant principals, and the district office staff. So we're going to be working on that. We're also working on updating our MTSS manual. We've got one that's for the Southland and 162 that's been around for a while. So Ms. Borschbach, while she was out having a little surgery, she started the process, and we're working through that now. And we're going to also add a parent component to that. So there's what the staff needs, what the students need, and then what the parents can do at home to really bridge what we're doing in school and in the home so that it's a seamless process. We all understand positive behavioral supports. Instead of using the word discipline, we really want to be, how can we be proactive instead of reactive to when children are learning how to behave appropriately in different places. And that's a big push with PBIS. That we've all developed matrices. So children have rules and regs in each of the different parts of the buildings, and they get trained, and taught how to behave when you go to the lunchroom, when you go to the restroom, when you go into the gymnasium. So they have different structures and rules hanging all over that help them support to be appropriate at all times. And we're trying to use all positive language instead of negative language. Next week, January 25th, we're having our second round of MTSS academic intervention training support for the principals and the team leads with Miss Laura Fisher. She came in before Christmas break and really got everybody excited about what are different kinds of interventions and things we can do in the classrooms to help support the children who are struggling a little bit, but really to give a push to those children who are already where they need to be so that they don't stay behind. We can push them ahead. So she really is working with us on working with how to coach our teachers up to do small groups for both students who are ready to move ahead and students who need a little more support to get to where they need to be. And the nice thing now is we have 2 benchmarks of STAR 360 data to look at and really see which kids need that level of intervention versus the level of acceleration. So principals have been delving into that data right now and looking through that and looking at how they're going to group their children, but Ms. Fisher is going to really help us with what kinds of interventions we can use to support the teachers to support the children. And lastly, in early February, we're beginning to use check-in, check-out as our tier 2 intervention for behavior. And it's going to be added to our Swiss account, which is where we track our behavioral infractions and positive things. But we're going to get a 30 to 45-minute training from PBIS Midwest so that we know exactly how to implement it appropriately. Our social workers know how to do it appropriately, but teachers need to use it and enter it. So we're going to have some training from PBIS Midwest again to do that. So that's kind of where we are. Again, it's always ebbing and flowing, but it's always moving forward. But if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. Okay.
Questions from the board?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
questions about both MTSS, but maybe we could start with the PBIS.
Mhm.
If you could talk a little bit about maybe some of the metrics associated with them. You mentioned the Swiss account.
Yeah, so Swiss is
But-
a tool. Mhm.
Maybe it's a two-parter. If you
Okay,
could talk
sorry.
about metrics, and then maybe, we've heard from some parents over the past few months about behaviors that, that they were unhappy with.
Mhm, mhm.
So perhaps there could be maybe some success stories or any follow-ups to some things that might fall under this area.
Okay, yes. So first of all, the matrix is there's two different kinds. There's the school-wide matrix, which really establishes appropriate behaviors throughout the school building. As I mentioned earlier, the lunchroom, the gym, the playground, all different parts of the buildings. Then each teacher also has a classroom matrix where they have developed the rules and regulations for their classroom. But in addition to just rules, they teach the children the behaviors that they expect them to demonstrate. And although we've had a few infractions this year, I think we know of all of them because of that have been brought here. There have been very few. Those behaviors have been dealt with. Those kinds of behaviors that escalate to beyond being able to interact positively with, we do have tier 3 supports from our social workers, school psychologists, and other trained staff that help work with that child, either through an intervention, counseling. Sometimes we have to remove the child to 45 days because the infraction was so significant, so that he gets counseling every day in an out of district placement for several days, 45 school days. And then we have a meeting to see if that student is ready to return, because the process in the out of district placement has been successful with daily counseling. If not, then he remains there for another period of time until they are ready to return to the district. Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. President, just also in regards to the MTSS manual,
Mhm.
I think it's great that it's going to be available for parents as well, especially in light of some of the parent concerns that have been expressed.
Yeah.
Where exactly is it going to be available?
So when we finish it, it'll be online, so that it can be accessed from the website. But our teachers will also have, a hard copy because it'll be all electronic, because the forms that they need for referral and interventions and parent notifications will all be electronically in the handbook, so that they can access it immediately. Parents may not have access to all of those forms. We can talk about that, but they will also, have the how-tos, the where-tos. This is the process, and that will be available on our website, the school website, and the Southland website.
Awesome. Does PBIS Midwest provide a similar manual?
All of the PBIS materials are at pbis.org online. You can get everything and anything from there. It's just a wonderful resource. And that's not even the PBIS Midwest, it's the national organization. And when we got our school climate grant, that's who we partnered with. And really, all of the materials that we use are from there. There's parent resources, there's family resources, there's teacher resources. Anything and everything you would want from A to Z is already there, and it's pbis.org. Get anything. Mhm.
That's amazing. Is that link provided on our district website for the parents?
Where's Daniel? Oh, we'll get it on there if it's not.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mrs. Hutchinson, two things that I'd like to see happen.
Mhm.
Number one, obviously, the principals will have copies and obviously we have it online.
Mhm.
But if you look at the numbers of people that access things that are online, I think the numbers are smaller.
Mhm.
I'd like to see Mrs. Dusky, dust off, Parent University
Okay.
and,
Mhm. Oh, yes, we have.
I think Parent University can take place both in person and online. And that would make the perfect thing for us to do in terms of engaging all parents. As you know, we can have up to 1,000 people, correct me, on Zoom at one time.
Mhm.
And so could we plan on doing that?
Yes,
So
we are
that
already
we-
in the process of the beginning stages of reaching out to parents for some of their ideas and then working with the principals and the teams to decide what topics are most prevalent for parent needs right now. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
And could we, at the next board meeting, announce the date that we'll have the parent university? Because I do
Sure.
think there's interest in PBIS, but I'm
Mhm.
not sure that everyone will go to pbs.com.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
we have not had a parent university since COVID.
Yeah.
So as we're evolving, let's evolve in that direction. But we can do it in person and virtually. So
Mhm.
It's wonderful.
Yes,
Okay.
excellent.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Mrs. Dusky. The spelling bee is one of my favorite activities. February 2nd, we invite everyone here. Obviously, most of the principals will be here anyway, but parents that are here, all board members at 6:30 p.m. And then we've also been asked to host the South Cook spelling bee. I think they'd love to come here. And so we will announce the date for that, which will be sometime in March. Something new for us. I have, when I'm downstairs, sometimes I see our young men and they're involved in a step show, but they're under the supervision of Dr. Corey Levy. You remember him, certainly. He was principal of the Hoove. Now he's principal here. And they've been rather low key. I was aware, but not through him, that they went to Homewood Flossmoor and they won the stepping competition there. And I think they were number 2 before. So they're quite good, but they've never performed here in this area. But Dr. Levy came to me and he said, we're having a problem. The high school that was supposed to host this competition is having a facilities problem. Can you think of a place for us to have it? And I said, I knew what he was asking. But unbeknownst to me, several middle schools, and you see they're coming from Indianapolis, Yorkville, Maryville, Chicago, etc. There are middle school teams under the auspices of the Kappa League. And then all of the high schools that will be here performing, Hinsdale, Wheaton, Downers Grove, HF, etc. It's in their rules that the host team can exhibit, but they cannot compete. And so this event is sponsored by the Greek organizations. Collectively, they're called the Divine Nine. We expect to seat 1,000 people. I think it will be a wonderful kind of event for us, but we're doing this only because of the fact that we can, and I also think it's a very, very positive event. So it's going to be February 18th, but all of these various schools will be represented. And I did not go to Homewood Flossmoor, but I will be downstairs, and our own stepping group will be not competing, but exhibiting. But I think it's interesting that the middle schools, but something I learned, I assumed that these were all young men. And I'm told that most of these groups have girls in them. So that's interesting that they would. So we've are doing this because of the Kappas, but we've also, the Alphas are involved, AKAs, Deltas, Iota Phi. It's a huge group. And so I don't think that we've ever welcomed 800 to 1,000 Greeks into our facility, but that's apparently what it's going to be. But our person is Dr. Corey Levy. We're more than happy to do this on February 18th, and we do absolutely invite everyone to come. But once again, I'm not having this. This is under and run by the CAPAS, various organization of CAPAS. And so I think it's going to be a magnificent show and competition. So I do invite you to come. History Makers. I think everyone here knows about History Makers. History Makers has existed for the past, well, actually 25 years. They have over 3,000 interviews that are available online. You may not know that a year and a half ago, Dr. Barbara Radner, and isn't it ironic that Dr. Barbara Radner from DePaul, who was sitting on our board at the time, would bring this to our attention, but they wanted to be involved with an elementary school. So a year and a half ago, they adopted the Huth, Mrs. Calvin, she's somewhere, okay, and Mr. Chandler, and they began to implement not only the access to the online archive, but a series of curriculums. One of them is called We Exist Because You Did. And all right, if you think about that, but another one is called Just Striving. We strive, therefore we succeed, therefore we prosper. And so we worked our way through these with History Makers, and Juliana came out here. She's done 3 in-services in person for us, but I'll give you the date. I don't yet have the date. 60 Minutes. And when they called me, you know, this is in the same category as when a man called and said, my name is Michael Jordan. I said, now, who are you really? And so when 60 Minutes called and asked if we would give permission for them to come to, I said kind of the same thing, excuse me, but 60 Minutes did come to the Who. They did tape our children, and they did ask them what impact, how do they feel about accessing the archives? What did they learn? And so the Who School, Mrs. Calvin has been working hard on that, and we will give you the date. We understand that it's going to be during Black History Month. But when we completed last year's semester, then History Makers wrote to us, and Mrs. Richardson, Juliana Richardson, said, I'd like to come in. And what she did was to adopt all of us. And so we are the prototype district from ages 3 to 12 that is going to be engaging in the curriculum. And we're taking training now. Obviously, the high school curriculum is a little different, but as we move down through the grades, smiles on the faces. I remember Mrs. McGuire and the children that were dressed in doctor's clothes, and those that had their little briefcases, et cetera. So I think it's just a magnificent idea. But what we're doing, we're not having a Black History Month. We're just having Black History every day that we can implement this and infuse it into our curriculum. So if you wonder what we're doing, the History Makers is also in the Library of Congress. When I talked to Juliana Richardson, and her in-service was right here in this room, she said that her dream, because everyone has to have a dream, she showed us the interview by Barack Obama, but this is when he was a senator. She wrote to him and tried to access him when he was president. She wasn't able to do that. Now he's past president. What she would want is to create this evolution, this from where he was and his thoughts that he shared when he was a senator up to the point where he now to see the maturity, the change in viewpoints, et cetera. So that's her dream. our dream is to stimulate interest in our children and to make this come alive. And it's just magnificent. But we are the only school district in our country, and we were chosen by her primarily, I think, Mrs. Calvin, because of the enthusiasm of your children. But I will give the board the date. But it was very interesting with 60 Minutes. You know, you think that they just come and they bring a camera. No, a whole huge truck and people. And I think Mr. Evans and Lights tried to get involved. No, they're self-sufficient. 60 Minutes is a force unto themselves. But what is more important really is the fact that we have access without cost to the curriculum, to the archives, and the archives continues to grow. So I don't know if there are questions, but Black History Month, no. The evolution and the immersion through our entire curriculum throughout the year, absolutely. So that's what we're doing.
Wonderful.
Our scholarship gala, I talked about that briefly, and I could use some help. I don't know. Someone told me that Mr. Johnson is now this so-called an alpha. I know Mr. Simpkins is an omega. We really we're inviting all of the presidents from the HBCUs. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing?
Yes.
So we're waiting to see how many of them will come. And this afternoon, I was shocked, but there are 37 districts. So as we write to our vendors for help, we also say we're not writing just as 162. You have 149, 157. So we're getting some support. If we can raise 100, it seems like it's a possibility now. I feel it. If we can raise $100,000 just from our vendors, and we plan on seeding 1,000, then what a magnificent evening we're going to have in April when we pass out these scholarships. And so if you're involved, I know that the principals are Mrs. Where are my deltas? Okay. Are the AKA supporting us? Anybody? All right. Okay. I want to say Kappa, Alpha. I'm looking at you, Mr. Blackburn. Tell me. Okay, you're just helping us. You're just helping us. But we need everyone, and if we can get the whole Divine Nine to be there, in other words, men and women representing all of the organizations, if we can get our HBCU presidents, but we're going to do this anyway, even if we don't. So I'm asking for help, but our goal is a minimum $100,000. But today, just before I came into the board meeting, I was informed that one business wrote a check for $12,500. If that is, but there were 7 superintendents that said, oh. So that is the strength of this. So we are determined that this will be a spring where we're going to put money into education in the form of scholarships in a much more aggressive manner than we have. So minimally, please come. Minimally, please come. Mr. Englert, business. I don't think anyone has any. Do you have any scholarship questions? But we're going to do this.
No question.
Good evening, Mr. Englert.
Good evening, Dr. Davis, Mr. President, members of the board. Good evening.
Good evening.
A couple of items tonight I just want to address that are on the new business agenda. Last month, Mr. Evans came to us and talked a lot about technology, things that have happened, things that are planned for the future. And one of the things he spent a lot of time on was talking about smart boards and getting up to date with smart boards throughout the district. So he was able to obtain proposals from 3 companies that the district has used in the past, the reputable companies. Xerox COTG was the lowest at $442,825, if I'm reading that correctly from the screen. You'll notice SHI is a little bit lower. They did not include the removal and installation of the old materials, so we had to discount their proposal. As we often do with some of these larger technology purchases, we negotiate these through a lease or recommend that you utilize a lease for those. We were able to negotiate a 4.7% lease, 5-year lease on this equipment, so we were very happy with the rate. That's through American Capital Leasing, who the district has used for many, many years. So on the agenda, the first new business item you have on the agenda tonight is an amendment to a master lease, they call it, that we've had with American Capital for many years to incorporate these smart boards. As I understand it, those should be in sometime around, Mr. Evans, March, I believe? Spring break. Okay. So if approved tonight, Mr. Evans will get that order into them and we'll get that out, get those installed pretty quickly. So any questions on that before I move on? Okay. Commercial kitchen. So the next 8 items that you have under new business are all related to construction, and we do have Archon Associates here, our architecture firm, Mr. Walls. They're going to talk a little bit more about construction this evening. I just want to touch on a couple of things because the big component of this building really is a commercial kitchen. And the goal of this commercial kitchen really is to provide really high quality meals and variety of meals, nutritious, fresh meals for the students in District 162, as well as other districts in the south suburbs eventually, but primarily here for District 162. So the goal of the district is to go out to bid for this very soon. We do have to get approval of the bid specs through the Illinois State Board of Education because it's part of the National School Lunch Program. So there's a process that you go through. We are working with a consultant to draft those bid specifications. And we really are looking to partner with a really good quality food provider that has experience in doing exactly what we're looking for. The priorities that we have, of course, food quality, variety, fresh meals, increased options. There are actually dinner programs, snack programs out there that the district can take advantage of through the National School Lunch Program. We'll be looking at those. And also, we'll be looking for someone who's going to partner to provide additional districts to participate and provide that revenue growth, to help pay for the building itself and to provide efficiencies within the lunch program itself. So those are the goals. And I'll be coming back to you probably sometime later in the spring to talk a little bit more about the bid and, of course, have you or recommend that you award the bid once we get everything out and we have the meetings with the providers. The property itself, so the 8 items on the agenda tonight total about $6.4 million, and that's related to the construction again that Archon will talk about. So the financing of this, really, we're recommending about $5 million in alternate revenue bonds. Alt revenue bonds are simply bonds that are not paid by taxes. They're paid by another revenue source. In this case, this would be sales of food to outside districts eventually once we get it up and running, and about $200,000 from local funds. There will be one, as I understand it, and they may talk about this, one additional small bid this spring of one other piece of the project needs to happen. And the balance will be paid for by a transfer of those working cash fund bonds that we talked about a couple of months ago. So that's the proposal of how we would finance that. Once those bids are approved tonight, we would probably be coming back to you next month to more formally have you start the process of the financing portion of it. Any questions on that piece?
Mr.
Yes,
President.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Just so the nature of the alt revenue bonds then makes the sale to other districts a primary component then of our strategy and objective for the use for the facility as opposed to a secondary or, a nice to have.
Yes. So once you issue those bonds, it's secured by an alternate revenue source. In other words, not taxes essentially.
understand.
So yeah.
But unless I've been hearing it wrong, we haven't really emphasized it as strongly and maybe even emphasize it in the nature of we talk about getting the vendors who will operate the facility and so forth. So if that's our primary way of paying for the bond, it would seem that we need to be talking about in those terms. That's a fundamental component of our expectation of how we expect the facility to operate.
Oh, absolutely. And part of that bid, those vendors will need to tell us how are they going to grow that and show us what that revenue is going to look like. And that will be a key component of that bid.
Very good. Thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, just a little bit too about some upcoming projects for the summer. These are not on the agenda this evening, but just want to make you aware of some things that we'll probably be coming back to you with. And these are summer 2023 projects. So some of these are actually ongoing right now, and that's finishing up the security camera upgrades, excuse me, for all of the schools within the district. The Huth bathroom renovations, which of course is being paid for by that ESSER funding. Huth interior exterior door replacements, some renovations to the Huth North Gym ceiling, selected parking lot areas throughout the entire district, so all of the buildings, and one of the Madison playgrounds being replaced, and the replacement of a fence at Sauk School. So just want to give you a preview of some of the things that we will be talking about in the next few months. Okay, so I think with that, we have Mr. Walczak and Archon.
Yes, if they would come forward, but I did want to add a couple of things. If you go into my conference room, you will see a huge, for want of a better word, a smart board, but it performs other functions. One of the things that the police chiefs asked me privately when they visited this summer was if we had an incident, which we have never had, but okay, if we had an incident, where would we stage? How would we see what's going on inside of the building? How would we see where the children are, where they are hiding? And just as important, I suppose, would be to see whoever the person is that had entered our building and what kind of weapon he was using. So if you go into my office now, we're in the process, but you can still see examples of that. When this is finished, if I touch on the Huth and a certain section of the Huth, you'll be able to see everyone in the hallway, everyone in any of the schools, but not just the perimeter of the school. What you'll be able to see is children in the lunchroom, children here. So we'll be able to follow or monitor our schools from outside of the environment. And once again, I'm grateful for all of the advice that we get. We've never been able to see that before. We would be able to, I could call Mrs. Calvin and say, why do you have all those students in the hallway? Because the bell is already rung. Not that I would do that, Mrs. Calvin, but we could do that. But it made total sense to me, coming from those in law enforcement, that they want to be able to make good decisions. And how would they make good decisions? But they can make them because they can actually see in real time. Now, this would not be obviously accessible to anyone else because we have to be careful, but we can do that ourselves. And we would have two of those here in the building. This is our district office. So they would know what they were encountering. Not that they would not go in blind. I guess that's a term that the police chiefs use, but they said they can be much more effective if in fact they see what they might encounter. So that is our goal. And before the end of the school year, with every school, we'll be able to see that. And I would be happy to do a demonstration, but we've begun this process now. And I mentioned some time ago that we do intend to hire a director of security. I mentioned, I don't think I'm innocent at all, but when I talk to the police chiefs, maybe I am innocent. We need someone that is looking at us from a different viewpoint. And so we are advertising now. There's an advertisement on the street, but you would have to have experience as a school security officer or some other kind of training in addition to a long list of other things. And our police chiefs are going to help us in the interview process. But that's just one of the things that we're doing. If you look at our parking lots, then, you know, we've done a lot of construction. It's now time to create some symmetry and smooth out the surfaces. And that's why we're doing that. The Sauk fence actually comes from the police chief. And that's why I wanted to mention that. He shared with Mr. Walczak that they can't see, you know, the trees and vines grow through the fence. They want to be able to see the school. And so that's the reason we're making that change. It's really not anything from our perspective wrong with the fence. It's just that it obscures the viewpoint of the police seeing what's going on. So you might say, why a new fence? Normally, we would not think that way, but it was brought to Mr. Walzak's attention, and that's why. But good afternoon. Welcome, Mr. Petrillo and Archon, and also Mr. Walzak. You don't often come to board meetings, so we look forward to this. Yes.
Actually, the last time I was here, the first time we had talked about the kitchen. We've made some changes of the design going since the last time I was here. The photo that you have up on top now, I think actually Eric made that with his drone, which is kind of neat. And you can see at that particular time, there was no roof on the gym itself, or the 4645 at that time. It now has a temporary roof on it. You know, so we're watertight. A permanent roof will go on, you know, come spring. If we can go to the next slide, go to the next one. Yeah, this is a little bit better. The biggest change since the last time I was here is, I think last time I was here, essentially what I said is, you know what, we're going to build a kitchen and a storage. It's evolved a little bit. We now have what we're calling a multi-purpose room, which is what I think is going to provide a lot of flexibility and relieve some of the pressure inside this building. Multi-purpose room meaning, you know, we can do registration in there. We can have meetings in there. You can have small functions in there. Small functions meaning you can probably seat comfortably, you know, 100 people at those, you know, the round tables that we use everywhere. You know, just for perspective, the multi-purpose room ended up being probably about the size of the boardroom. So right about where Mr. Murphy's monitor is, from there to the windows, and 6 feet wider than what we have here.
Nice.
You know, so it's a nice space. You know, we have, you know, projectors in there and the normal things. You know, but that's the big change. And obviously we added bathrooms for that, you know, et cetera. Other than that, the design itself is pretty much the same as we had talked, you know, but that was, you know, a pretty substantial change. Did not add a lot to the cost, with the exception of we had to, if we're going to be using it for outside folks, we have to add bathrooms. We had to add 2 bathrooms. Not the end of the world, you know, big picture ways. If we can go next, the next few are just different aerial views. This one, it's from looking at the southwest corner, and if you look where the multi-purpose room is, you'll see round tables. That's seating for, pardon me, seating for 90 as drawn. But you can see there's still a fair amount of space. So once we get the, you know, the space done, we probably figure we'd be somewhere closer to 100, 110. In this space, I've done 110, very tight, but you know, we have done it. And like I said, we are, I think this space is about a little over 1,900 square feet, and that one's 2,300 square feet. Go to the next one. This is, if you're inside looking, you know, again, same 90 table setup. You know, you got, you know, some serving tables and stuff you can have on the side. There will be access from the commissary kitchen around back, so you know, we can get food and stuff in and out. People can clean up without disrupting a function. Next one. This is how it would look if we were having, you know, let's say a meeting or a training. There's, I believe, 50 seated there, so you're probably looking at 50 to 60, you know, sitting at tables. That's the famous kitchen. You know, looking west. We're going to add a few windows in there just to get some sunlight. Nothing exciting about the kitchen. It's a kitchen. Next one. Yeah, it's another kitchen view. You know, so we did make some changes, and I think, you know, like I said, make a big difference, you know, because we do have a lot of stuff in here. And I think we can move a lot of it over there, or you know, even something as simple as a bid opening we had the other day for the bids we're asking you to approve tonight. You know, we had to quick, you know, move class out of here, you know, bring the bidders in here. We wouldn't have to do that, and you can leave it set up. So, whether you have, a meeting set up or a table set up, it's not something you have to, bring a bunch of folks in at the last minute, quick change it over. The kitchen folks will be responsible for, doing food, so we take that out of the equation. So I don't know, questions?
Yes. In one of the renderings, there appeared to be a van or some other type of motor vehicle
Correct.
At what appeared to be a door. Now, is that for delivery purposes or is that for other purposes as well?
It's actually both. I don't know, Eric, can you go back? It's actually for both. If you look on the north side and on the south side, there's an overhead door. One is primarily just for the kitchen, because they're going to be moving in a lot of food and stuff. And on the south side, we have another one. The large area you see, if Eric stays on the picture, on the right hand side, you see a
Yes.
large empty area. That's what I'm calling bulk storage. Right now, we have a lot of things. We have stages, we have banquet tables, we have chairs, a whole host of variety of things that we use, throughout the district, which we hope that, to store over there. There is where you see the van on the right hand side. We can, bring it in there, unload it. On the other side, you can see a little bit, there's an overhead door for a Sprinter that can come in. Yeah, you can see. I'll try another
Go to
one.
the colored plan,
Try the colored one.
the colored plan. There you go. It's the gray space on the right.
Yeah, on the right
Yes.
hand side, that gray space. We don't want to be able to, have to load food in the middle of winter, in January outside. So the Sprinter will fit inside. You can load it up. When you're getting deliveries and things like that. So if a semi pulls up, we'll have what they call a pallet stacker. It's similar to a forklift that you don't ride on, so, it's 1,200 square feet in that area. So you literally could unload an entire semi into that space. Is it going into dry storage? Is it going in their freezer? Is it going in, so sort it, check it in, then put it where it is. It's designed so that, the food comes in, goes into the storage areas, freezer, refrigerator, dry goods, goes out the other end of those spaces into the kitchen, cooks it, comes around the corner, back into the dock, and then back out again. So it's somewhat of it's a circle, but a straight line, if you will.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you for your question. And I would just kind of build on it. I presume at some point you'll talk about maybe the asphalt updates, and then maybe access ways to the new facility, or would you like to address that now, since we're on the subject of bringing food in, bringing food out, access to the building?
Asphalt over there will be done probably come spring. Access will be almost identical to the way it is. What'll be a little bit different on the west side of the building, there's enough space. The entrance to the kitchen for employees will be on the west side. We'll have diagonal parking on the west side. We're trying to keep the north lot free, so we can have semis turning around without having to worry about moving employees, cars and things. Now, if you're having a function or something, then you certainly could use it, because we will stripe it, but the intent is to try and keep that north side clean. We initially were trying to get deliveries on the other side, and on the west side, the lot's not a rectangle, which we didn't know up, on the front end. So we couldn't make the turning radiuses with the trucks, and that's the way it evolved, but it will get replaced this spring. We have to do new utilities as far as storm sewer, sanitary, and water. The elevations underground don't work for us. They work for the skate rink, they don't work for us. So we have to put them in, so we're going to have to dig up a lot of it anyway. So it will get all replaced. North side will be a little bit beefier, if you will, because obviously you're bringing in a semi, you can't, just run it on 2 inches of asphalt, but it all will be done. And then we will do some landscaping and stuff out there as well.
Sure. Thank you for that. I guess my questions were around if there's any more on thought around traffic at the facility based off the design now and then the plans you're planning to do when we move forward with making, preparing lunches for our own school district and the other school districts that we expect to be selling to. Is there anything you could speak to that about traffic flows? Loading, unloading, access for
food service.
ingredients and prepared.
That'll probably be more on the food service vendor that we hire. as far as how they do that, because I don't know, are they going to be running 2 shifts? Are they going to be, trying to do 1 shift? How are they going to ship? Those are things that, they could probably answer better than us.
Okay. So not all those have been addressed in the design of either the access ways and the parking lot.
Well, the access won't change. They'll still be coming out of the west entrance over here. In and out will still be off of the west entrance. But it won't change the design of the lot itself.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes, Mrs. Hutchinson.
I had a question just in regard to the multipurpose room. Is the idea that would also be a source of revenue?
If
that
I
we would use
could,
one?
last Friday, we had a luncheon for 100 people. We were celebrating our golden apple. We went to the Madison Holiday Inn. We would go right across the parking lot and have those events so that we would not be writing a check outside of the family, so to speak. I'm also extremely excited about the staff development possibilities. Normally we go to the Huth. We would go right across the parking lot. But generally speaking, Preferred Meals and now Just a Dash generally have 2 trucks that are delivering to our 8 schools. And so I think, and I don't presume, I'm not an architect to respond to that, but that's what I would anticipate that would happen. But from working with the other superintendents, there is a need for someone that is school-based to provide food, particularly if we're able to provide at an economical cost and food that is delicious. Right now, we don't have input into this. Someone else decides what we serve.
Yes.
We will decide what we serve as long as it meets the federal requirements in terms of nutrition. But in terms of saving money, there are a lot of things that we do in other facilities. Now, we would not have a dance, we'll have the 8th grade, those kind of things. No, that would not be. But many of the smaller things that we have, I would be able to do ourselves. The catering kitchen, because all of our schools and our PTSOs and our principals have activities when they honor people, Teacher Appreciation Week, etc. All of those things, we could order food from our own source and provide it to the schools. I have no idea. I'd have to ask Craig how much money we spent on pizzas in this building on sandwiches, but that's something that could be made in-house at a more reasonable price. I think everyone is aware of the huge markup now and the market, but I like the idea that Craig is bringing all of those vendors in, and they have to do an interview and tell us how they're going to communicate with us, because that's a big thing. Everyone will hire a professional chef because that has to be, but how they will operate first will be the test group for a year, but before the year is up, then we will begin moving out to bring other districts in. The idea really intrigues me, but yes, we will save money in the long run.
Can I also, Mr. President, just, and this may be a question for Craig that should have answered or asked earlier today, but are there other districts that we've seen do this, take this strategy of revenue building? Are there best practices that we're drawing from?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So in Illinois, up until this year, Illinois is one of maybe the only state, if not one of 2 states, where all you could do was bid out food service and it went to lowest price. That was it. No other factors really mattered. And so outside of Illinois, you see this model, and that's why the consultant we're working with has worked in states outside of Illinois doing this very thing. There are some schools in Illinois that I have spoken to, Union School District in Joliet. I believe HF does this to a much smaller degree. And then there's another school up north I did have a conversation with. So it's much more limited here. I can tell you, Union School District started this several years ago. They're doing quite well. Mr. Walczak and I, we've met with 5, I think, different vendors now, who have, some approached us, some we approached. There's strong interest. And, you know, they all come with their other contracts already in place. And so they're kind of looking at it too, like, okay, we could bring in this one, we can bring in that one. So yeah, it is a little unique in Illinois, not that it hasn't been done, but it is a model that we are seeing strong interest in. So.
Oh, very good. Thank you.
Are there
Mr.
any other
President.
questions from my board colleagues? Dr.
Thank you,
Davis,
Mr. President.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you. And does that conclude the superintendent's report?
It does, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any legislation, Dr. Davis, of which you are aware?
No, we're simply reorganizing at this point and electing the leadership in the House and the Senate. We do have bills that we're in the process of reviewing that were passed during the last legislative session, but nothing has been passed thus far that
Yes.
affects us directly. There are some bills that are interesting, such as the automatic gun bill, et cetera, et cetera. I really don't want to get into that because, you know, we don't allow guns in our facility. And from my personal perspective, there are too many guns that are available outside of armed forces and the police. But there are some things that have passed, but not that I consider to be relevant to us at this point. But we are looking at all the bills that passed last term, and we will implement those and integrate them into our handbooks. And if they rise to that occasion, we will also share them publicly.
Yes, thank you. And I know we'll be watching carefully for what the governor has to say about this whole universal daycare that he's talking about.
I think that will happen.
Yes,
We have already been notified that our daycare proposal will be approved. And we have only to fill out the paperwork. Remember, the Richardson Square is almost 100% driven by grants. And so they have been, we were issued simply the right to continue on, and we have some minor paperwork to do. So that's simply going to be, and I think that the only way that our country is going to improve is that we buy into early childhood education. So I anticipate Governor Pritzker making this a fact. But for us, it probably would be, unless there's additional money that's available in addition to the grants, it could be. But what I look at also, because we've been in this business a long time, right now, you know, at all levels, governments are borrowing a lot of money, and they're issuing it to us. And grants, probably because of the pandemic, definitely because of the pandemic. Sooner or later, we're going to have to operate only on what we're due by virtue of property taxes and grants, et cetera. We have not yet reached that point, which is why we're doing so much construction while the money exists, because there's a time frame that you have to spend it. But this is not usual times financially.
yes, but certainly times
Most of the grants we
opportunity.
write, we're getting.
Yes,
Yes. Mhm.
yes. Well, I am grateful for an administration and finance person who is keeping an eye on the funding that's available to us and quite frankly, making the best use of it. So
Mr.
thank you
President,
for your
I
efforts.
have a
Yes,
question.
Member McCray.
I have a question, Dr. Davis. It's good with the security cameras and the motion detectors, but we're also can rest assured that we have the correct security in place so we don't have a Virginia incident.
Are you referring to the little child
Yes.
that, I'm not sure that we can anticipate something of that sort. I don't think that they could either, a 6-year-old, but, we're monitoring everything that we can monitor on a day-to-day basis, but I do, welcome, a director of security that's doing nothing but looking at the ebb and the flow. We have already limited, the numbers of people from the outside that come in our buildings. But if you're asking if we would search children every day, I don't think that that's what you're asking me, but
No.
we're doing everything that we can in terms of security. But I think the community is cooperative because they're not seeking to access us. Except when we have events and if they're coming in by appointment and that kind of thing. But one of the requests that I made of the police chiefs, and they're doing that, is when they don't have an incident, I'm very comfortable with them walking our hallways, and they're doing that on a regular basis. I asked them if they would walk with the principal so that no one's afraid, because it surprised me, even here in the high school, we had police officers here, and I don't even remember the purpose that they were here. But one of the older kids said, well, is there something wrong? So I want them to become comfortable with seeing police officers and not just assume that there's an issue. So you will see policemen in our schools on a regular basis, walking the hallways. One of the things that's disappeared from years ago, remember the officer friendly? And then we began to call them an SRO. They don't exist as much as they did before, but we do have a presence every day from our police. And I want them inside the building when there's not something else. But I don't know how a school district would have anticipated. And, I don't know the nuances of the Virginia thing. I just know what happened in the end. Did they have good security? I can't comment on that. But a 6-year-old with a gun is a rarity, but that goes back to the homes. Why is there a loaded gun in the home? I say that to parents all the time. And if you think children are not watching, they're always watching. They're always watching. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but it would not be our intent to search little children every day. And I think that's the only thing that they could have done. But once again, I'm not in Virginia. I don't know exactly what happened internally. I just know the result, what was mentioned on television.
I have a question, but I think I'll ask it without revealing how we are operating with some of our security. I think it would be best asked so that you don't want the bad guys to know what we are doing with our security. So I was going to.
That's why I'm trying to be careful and just giving information, but I want to be open, but other people are watching us. I don't know who is watching us at this point, but
And on a somewhat similar note, I hope that anyone who is viewing this meeting, either live or later, would certainly think very, very hard about getting a gun safe to put the gun in if they have a firearm at home, so that children will not have access to it. There are some very sophisticated gun safes out there. Some are biometric, some have combinations and so on and so forth. But definitely, I pray that they secure whatever firearm they have in the house, because as you indicated, that's really where it starts.
And don't put bullets in the gun. How about that?
Well, that would also help you. You store the ammunition separate from the firearm. Another thing too is the issue of having police officers walk through the school. And you mentioned the officer friendly. I remember those days. And for the police officers to walk through the school, not only do the children get to see them, but they get to see the children. And they know who they are as they're walking through here. So what we do in life is we build community, and community is based on relationship. So as they walk through the building, establishing positive relationships with the children and the children with them, then certainly that helps should they see a child outside, maybe throwing a snowball at a bus or something. They'll know, hey, wait a minute, that's one of District 162 children. I know who that is. I can walk over to them and have a conversation with them without it being intimidating. So just my thoughts.
Thank you, sir.
With regard to new business, we have already prefaced the items that are on the agenda. And so the first item we talked about involved a master lease agreement with American Capital Leasing. Is there a motion regarding that agenda item?
Mr. President,
Yes, Dr. Leatherwood.
move to approve Schedule M to the master lease agreement with American Capital Leasing for the 5-year lease of 125 75-inch smart boards to be installed throughout the district.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion, Dr. Davis?
No, sir, except if their teachers watching, I'm sure they're jumping up and down. This is something that they have wanted. And there should not be a teacher in within the district. Mr. Evans, correct? But you didn't say that with a lot of certainty, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, there being no further discussion, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson. Aye. Mr. Murphy.
Aye. And the next item has to do with asphalt paving and site utilities. Is there a motion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Vice President.
move to award the bid for asphalt paving and site utilities to Abbey Paving in the amount of $558,205.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
No, sir.
There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye.
Thank you. The next motion involves, or next anticipated motion involves masonry. Is there a motion?
Yes, move to approve the bid for masonry to Midwest Masonry in the amount of $384,500.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy.
Aye. The next item involves roofing. Is there a motion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Vice President.
move to approve the bid for roofing to Crowther Roofing and Sheet Metal Incorporated in the amount of $547,200.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy.
Aye. The next item involves carpentry and general works. Is there a motion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Dr. Leatherwood.
move to approve the bid for carpentry and general works to Bear Constructions in the amount of $2,200,000 $29,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item involves fire protection. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the bid for fire protection to Nelson Fire Protection in the amount of $114,535.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy.
Aye. We do have an item involving the mechanical and HVAC systems. Is there a motion?
Mr.
President.
President,
Okay, tie goes to the senior member. So, Mr. Bean, Mr. Vice President.
move to approve the bid for mechanical HVAC to Crowther Sheet Metal and Roofing in the amount of $868,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy.
Aye. The next item involves plumbing. Is there a motion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Vice President.
move to approve the bid for plumbing to JB Contracting in the amount of $491,700.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye.
Thank you. The next item involves electrical. Do we have a motion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Dr. Leatherwood.
move to approve the bid for electrical to Meany Incorporated in the amount of $1,415,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the matter?
Mr. President,
Yes, Member Johnson.
could they speak to the only two bids for the electrical? I know one was addressed earlier. Was this also addressed earlier as to why we only had two bids?
Okay, if we could have someone address it from the podium, please.
Thank you. We've solicited, obviously, it's a publicly advertised project. We solicited somewhere in the ballpark of 6 to 8 electricians to bid. We only got responses from 4, I believe, and 2 ended up backing out. I don't know if we have actual reasons why. Of course, the bidders don't know how many bidders are bidding. So those 2 bidders would have assumed that, you know, there were 6 to 8 bidders bidding on it.
Very good. Thank you.
And the litmus test we use is lowest responsible bidder. Is that correct? Yes, thank you. All right, we've had a motion, a second, and discussion. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy.
Aye. Now we move to the point in our agenda where we have old business. Is anyone aware of any old business?
I am not, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we move on to board member issues and reports.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Vice President.
Yes, I would just ask that the person who prepares the agenda be aware that the protocol is that the president not be listed as a mover on a motion.
I agree, sir, and that's why I yielded to my board colleagues. Thank you very much for that.
Mr. President,
Yes, Dr. Leatherwood.
It may be something minor, but since we've been talking about so much construction work, I think that the sign outside may be leaning somewhat,
Maybe what, I'm sorry.
maybe leaning to one side.
As you come in,
Yes, ma'am.
okay.
So just to see if someone could take a look at that, and if it is leaning, if,
It will be coming out.
okay,
As part of this project, and I don't, we didn't get that in, did we not? We still have some more bids coming up, as Mr. Engler had mentioned. One is for exterior work, which will also include, we're putting a marquee sign out there.
Okay.
It's somewhat like the village has. So the one that is leaning over, that'll all go away and a new one will go in. We haven't picked the location yet, you know, maybe it goes a little farther over, east, west, what have you, but there will be a marquee sign eventually.
thank you.
Okay, and for the sake of transparency and safety, we do know that it's not leaning to the point of falling or being a potential hazard. Is that correct?
It's just
Okay,
a-
thank you. Just want to be very clear on that.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Leatherwood. We now have on our agenda audience to visitors. This is an opportunity for anyone who is present to bring forth a comment or a question regarding any matter that they so choose that has to do with the school district that is or is not on the agenda. Is there one? There being none and no further business for this board to discuss this evening. The meeting is now adjourned. Have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
That's a good way to bring it in.